jab, uppercut, leave you laid out on the floor. Try to duck and roll, hit and miss, now you counting stars. Should've practiced more, should've hit the mask, get out there more. Claim that you're the best. You gotta show me, son. Actions over words, baby boy. Is you real or what? Talking way too much, world come. Back sports, talking way too much, world come. Back sports, talking way too much, world come. Back sports,
Yo, big shout out to the hottest chat in the MF and game. A-side, official, no negotiations needed, period. You already know WCS back with a hitter. Yes, this right here is very intriguing to me. Hall of Fame chances among active fighters. Shout out to the best in the business. BoxingScene.com put out a list that is worthy of boxing discussion. This list right here is very, very worthy of other people's giving their other fight fans giving their assessment on if what they see on this list is following the guidelines, or if you really pay attention to the actual sure shots, probables, long shots, and too soon to tell. There's some room in there that's going to make you shake your head. Why? Because if you're a hardcore fight fan, you stay close to, these fighters' phenomenal readings, right? And what their accomplishments are. You ask yourself, why is so-and-so in this and not in that? And then the other, so-and-so has disqualifications, this and the other. Man, it depends on a huge pamphlet of, I guess, documentation that us as fight fans don't know, but the people whoever drafted this up, I'm not sure how many people that they sourced this from to provide some type of prerequisites or currently standing criteria or whatever the case may be. I couldn't tell you. It's the good with the bad. Some of these names that's in these positions, absolutely. I would tell you for a fact that they should be there. And some of these other names, oh my goodness, it's definitely up for discussion. It is definitely something, a list of fighters that you can look at and you assure yourself, okay, my mind not playing tricks on me when I'm looking at this particular fighter at the sure shots. I believe they should be where they at. And then, like I tell you before, you get to the end and then you say to yourself, well, there's some other fighters' names that should be in the sure shots. Is it some of the sure shots should be in the probables? Some of the probables should be long shots. Or do you think long shots should be up with the probables? And then the too soon to tell, that really gets a little shaky. You know what I'm saying? Like off-road terrain, because it's some fighters down there with some credentials. You know what I'm saying? They have the belts. They have the divisional titles. But yet, it's too soon to tell by whoever created this list. But I will say this, in all honesty, it's an intriguing list when it comes to boxing. There's a lot of chit-chatter that can happen from this. I find it very conducive. You know what I'm saying? Because it makes you think, like, whoever derived this list, they wasn't trying to be 100% correct. They were just trying to put together a list that is absolutely respectable. You know what I'm saying? The information, the fighters that they have in there, it's not so far fetched that it doesn't make sense. No, this thumbnail makes sense in many ways, but like I said, some of these names would make you kind of shake your head a little bit and say, "What was this person thinking? Why is this fighter's name down here? I mean, why is this fighter down here under this title when they can potentially be up there at a higher, like the probables?" But let's get started. Shall we? Shall we get started? We're going to go to the boxing scene article. Okay. Mm-mm. So hopefully y'all can see everything on this list. Okay. So what I would try to do is, okay, this is how I'm going to delegate this information, filter this information rather. I don't want to take down the thumbnail, so I'm going to read you the information per boxingscene.com on each fighter. It's not going to be extensive, but you can see the fighters up there from top to bottom. Okay. Sure shots is them being confident enough, whoever basically drafted this up, that they're surely going to the Hall of Fame. Okay. And then you have probable. It's like probable. It's a little doubt there. Yeah, probably they will get into the Hall of Fame based on what they've already accomplished and what they intend to accomplish before knotting the gloves. Okay. Long shots. You know, the long shots, it's like, well, we're not too sure if they're going to get in the Hall of Fame. Now, when I say this, speaking about it earlier, I kind of looked at it like, are they just talking about first ballot Hall of Fame? Because they said nothing about it. I haven't really went through the article because I want to read it for the first time so I can do a genuine reaction to it, right? But is Long Shot saying they're not going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame? I mean, a long shot to be first ballot, or they may potentially get on somewhere up the road. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Too soon to tell is self-explanatory, simplicity at its best. It's too soon for them to pretty much gauge a confirmation that these fighters will enter the Hall of Fame if they was retired today or whatever the case may be. But let's get down to this. Shout out to boxingscene.com. We're going to look at the list in text from boxingscene.com that I thought was a very, very informative list to make. It says, there's never a bad time really to wonder which active fighter, okay, active, these are active fighters, will eventually become Hall of Famers. But this feels like an especially appropriate time. So that's exactly what I'm doing with the column. And I'm breaking them down into 4 categories. Sure shots, okay? Boxing Scene explains it, and the author of this is Eric Raskin. Sure shots, which is at the very top. It says this one should be self-explanatory. These are fighters who could retire tomorrow and be assured of induction, or who could lose their next 10 fights in a row and then retire and still be assured of induction. Such is the shine of their current credentials. Okay. Sure shots is going off their current credentials and everything else. They did enough right at this moment. They're surely getting into the Hall of Fame. Probables. Boxers who are firmly in the mix, but figure to be the subject of contentious debates the first time their names appear on the ballot. Okay. First time their names appear on the ballot. So this is pretty much talking about them becoming eligible for the first time and whether they get, whether they're admitted from the vote to enter the Hall of Fame on first ballot. More clear, concise information. The induction standards now being what they are, they're likely to get in eventually, but it's far from certain and unlikely to happen on their first try. Okay, we provide some clarification. This is encompassing a first ballot entry, okay, upon eligibility. This is encompassing that. Long shots. These guys can't be entirely ruled out. The likes of Vinny Paz and Michael Moore were surely viewed as long shots at one time. But in all likelihood, they've spent their post-pugilism years on the outside looking in. Oh, I wish I would have known that early when I was having discussing their post-pugilism years on the outside looking in. Long shots, y'all. Too soon to tell. There are all different degrees of too soon to tell. But this category isn't the likes of Abdullah Mason, Keyshawn Davis, Moses Ayatuma, or anyone else who has talent, but hasn't yet had anything close to a defining fight. If you're to any degree still a prospect, and yes, sadly, one can be both a prospect and a belt holder at the same time nowadays. That is very, very unique, isn't it? You know what I'm saying? They say you could both be a prospect and a belt holder at the same time. It's wild. It continues. It's too soon to even put you on this too soon list. Rather, this category is for boxers who've proven a thing or two at the elite level, but need to do more before we can properly debate their International Boxing Hall of Fame worthiness. So, it's about to get very, very informative after we finish what's too soon to tell. All right. It goes on to say a couple of key clarifications. First, we're strictly looking at the modern men's category here. So, yes, Clarissa Shields, Amanda Serrano, and Katie Taylor are all 100% guaranteed Hall of Famers, but that's subject matter for a different article. Okay? The women is for a different article, y'all. And I know they feeling like, huh? You could have made a slot for us, man. It's always room for the ladies. And second, we're focusing on active fighters. If you haven't fought in more than 3 years and could potentially have your name on the next ballot, like Gary Russell Jr. and Leo Santa Cruz, both long shots anyway, even if you're never officially announced your retirement, I'm skipping over you. And if you have announced your retirement, like Lomachenko, sure shot, Sergey Kovalev, straddling the fence between probable and long shot, or Daniel Jacobs, extremely long shot, they say. Ooh, you're not part of this. Daniel Jacobs get underscored. Ooh, air quotes. Extreme long shot, y'all. He's taking shots. This man is a slingshot expert. His goddamn look, he holds the bag for expert when it comes to slingshot target practice. The one exception to the rule, Tyson Fury, because very few observers are taking his latest retirement announcement seriously. All right, we don't need this article running as long as the late great Steve Smoker 2015 induction speech. So enough preamble. Let's get down to it. This is the sure shots, people. Okay, this is the sure shots. Pay attention, please. Saul Canelo Alvarez. It says you spend about a decade as the most bankable star in the sport. You reach the top of the pound for pound list and you win titles in 4 divisions, 2 of them lineal, and there's nothing to debate. Even if you had a dalliance with tainted meat and did some cherry picking in your later years. Ooh, I'm about to take this down. I want y'all really to see this, okay? All right. I just finished reading Canelo Alvarez, and they mentioned him cherry picking in your later years. Next in the sure shots, Alexander Usyk, Olympic gold medalist, a lineal cruiserweight champion, a lineal heavyweight champion, pound for pound king, lovable, goofy, grinning weirdo. Try poking a hole in his Hall of Fame case. I dare you. I said the same thing. I believe Alexander Usyk is definitely a sure shot, just like Canelo Alvarez. And for him to be on the brink, the cusp, okay? Very, very close to potentially becoming 3-time undisputed, y'all. Next is the Omaha Monster, Terrence Bud Crawford. He too is also on the cusp, the brink. He's right there, lined up for a 3-time undisputed berth. The first male to ever do it. Wait, hold up, wait a minute. In 3 divisions, not 3 times, in 3 divisions, y'all. It says Terrence Crawford. If Bud beats Canelo in September, he enters that stratosphere where anyone who doesn't vote for him on the first ballot should have their right to vote taken away. Actually, Crawford can blah, 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 blah by Alvarez, and that punishment would still be appropriate. We're not going to speak any type of deficiency such as a KO on Crawford's name. We're not going to do that over here. We're not going to speak such blasphemy that Crawford gets K. What? No, he's doing the KOing. We didn't dare speak that forbidden language. You know what I'm saying? We dare speak that forbidden language over here. So I got to keep it moving. But he tried to sneak one in on there. Terrence Crawford, Hall of Famer, if he retires today. Naoya Inoue, somebody calls him in a way. Just another 2-weight undisputed champ like Usyk and Crawford, but with a knockout rate to make their eyes water. The designation of best fighter ever from Asia is potentially on the table over the remainder of his career. And no, I haven't already forgotten about Manny Pacquiao. Well, one thing I can say about this, man, you know, I've always put the overrated tag on Monster. And people tend to get upset, but I say, how you are so eager to jump up in defense of Inoue when somebody says he's overrated, and you don't even show your own fighters in your own country that same type of immediate response. You know, I mean, they just give Monster can get knocked down, be on all fours, and after the fight is over, that's warrior spirit. Woohoo! We love watching Monster fight. See, I love, man, he's willing to get in the fire. He's willing to go in there and take risks. A lot of fighters over here, they don't, man, get out of here, bro. Get out of here, man. But it's not up to me. I didn't write the list. He has done enough. You know, he is a 2-division undisputed. And that's a lot. That's a lot. Now, to further, you know, basically, if you was to scrutinize it a bit more, I mean, that's different. But we're not here to do that. We're just here to go step by step. Next, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. His 52-4 record ain't bad. But in a just world, it could be 55-1. Gonzalez ruled each of boxing's 4 smallest weight classes. And if not for that dame Ricardo Lopez, he'd be the greatest strawweight ever. And shout out to Chocolatito Gonzalez and Ricardo Lopez, man. If anybody, you know anything about that, you know, definitely a hitter. I mean, Chocolatito, man, back in his heyday, good Lord. And that's what I try to put out here to these boxing fans, or I want to say the community, to kind of insert heyday. Heyday to me is better than using prime. For real. Heyday to me is when they're at the top of their game and they still have the spark to win, right? prime, in my opinion, is where people always try to gauge an age. This age right here to this, no, I'm just thinking about when they was having some of their best fights. Keep it moving. Nonito Donaire. Whether you're looking for explosiveness, longevity, moving up in weight, moving down in weight, year-end awards, or staging comebacks, the Filipino Flash career had a little bit of everything. Now we're talking about a 4-weight class champion. It seems like Nonito doesn't get old. The man has a total of 51 fights, man. Yes, he is from the Philippines, though Manny Pacquiao is somewhat like the impromptu when you talk about 8 divisions and him being from the Philippines. But, Nonito Donaire is a Filipino himself. And he was putting in work back then. He's been in there with some of the top names. So it's a no-brainer that he's going into the Hall of Fame if he was retired ASAP. He's in there. You know what I'm saying? Very talented dancer, too. Very athletic. But there's no question that in his heyday, yes, he was putting in that work. So salute to the Filipino Flash. Tyson Fury. I just covered this case a couple of weeks ago. Love him or hate him, heavyweights with resume half as good as Fury. The second longest reigning lineal champion in division history. Have gained entry into the hall. He's a first ballot lock, even if the vote figures not to be unanimous. You know what's wild about some of the stuff I'm reading in this for the first time is that Tyson Fury can somewhat pick up tenure as a lineal champion, even though he was out the sport, even though he left the sport without being beaten due to controversy and PEDs and whatever else he was on. He left the sport for several years. And yes, he was the lineal champion because when he returned, that was the broadcasting return banner. A lineal champion. Tyson Fury, the heavyweight lineal champion, has returned. That's what they was talking about. So for me, it's amazing how you can still build up your tenure as a lineal champion, and for them to consider him, hold up, the second longest reigning lineal champions in the division. And it's crazy how he still was able to obtain the lineal even when he was out of the sport. Only because there was no undisputed champion. There was no undisputed champion, y'all. When Tyson Fury came back, thanks to Deontay Wilder, he was Tyson Fury's defibrillator. He gave Tyson Fury life back in the boxing game. His first 2 fights was Sepa Safari, Francisco Pianetta, man. Like, who knows them guys? But he was still the lineal heavyweight champion. He had never been beaten as of yet. Even though I believe a certain fighter called, Deontay Wilder at that time knocked him out cold, but that's for another day. But Tyson Fury was considered one of the top heavyweight champions when Deontay Wilder faced him for the first time. And then it turned into a very historic trilogy. Well, both fighters, in my opinion, took a lot of damage in that trilogy, but also I believe they made a lot of money too. Next, Dmitry Bivol. The Russian resume lacks the depth of these other sure shots. Perhaps, but there's no scenario in which a lineal champ who defeated both Canelo Alvarez and Artur Beterbiev controversy-free, isn't a Hall of Famer. So, as I was discussing earlier in the AM, there was questions about the why. Because sure shots did not include Artur Beterbiev, a fighter who was undisputed prior to Dmitry Bivol. But they say don't use triangle theory. Don't use that because I don't want to hear that. But in this case, wouldn't triangle theory equate to the problem solving, deductive reasoning conclusion that we look forward to? Yeah. Baturbiev, right? He gets the titles from Bivol, but Bivol, when they have a rematch, beats Baturbiev, and it's almost like on this list, a sure shot, they're including Demetrius Bivol win over pound for pound great as Canelo Alvarez. Even though Canelo's titles wasn't on the line, he did move up to challenge Bivol at 175 pounds, light heavyweight. So it's almost like that triangle theory, like, yeah, you have Bivol, you have Baturbiev, and you have Canelo. Canelo, right? He didn't contend for undisputed light heavyweight, but he did contend for Demetrius Bivol's world championship. Okay. At that point in time, he lost the fight. And also, truth be told, Bivol get credit for that Canelo win, even though Canelo was the 168 reigning defending undisputed champion. So a triangle theory does equate to this because it ties it in to a fighter who became undisputed light heavyweight champion after Baturbiev won the first time, right? Then he beat Baturbiev in the rematch, but yet Baturbiev, he collected all the belts. He did what he's supposed to do. And if you look at his resume, he has a win over the one and only Demetrius Bivol, who defeated Canelo Alvarez. Shout out to Triangular Theories. Moving on, Juan Francisco Estrada. If Chocolatito was the Muhammad Ali of tiny fighters of the 2000s, then Estrada was his Joe Frazier. There are worlds in which El Gadio doesn't get there on his first ballot, but there are no worlds in which he doesn't ultimately get there. So pretty much what they're saying, this is in circulation, and you know, you can take it how you want, perceive it to be surrounding first ballot entry, which makes all the sense in the world now. But you know, for Juan Francisco Estrada, they're saying, hey, yeah, you might be waiting around just a little bit, but eventually you will get there. You know, you may not get there initially when you're eligible, when your eligibility hit, but you might get there. I not think it's fair. I think the sure shots are fair for the names that they have up here, but there can be some shuffling, just like a card game. You can rearrange some cards up in here now. Yes, sir. You can. Let's get to the probables. And if you're in the building, can you please, if you feel free, hit the like button. You know, hit the like button if you choose to. Okay? I appreciate you. Let's get to the probables. This is going to be very interesting. This is going to be very why. This where starts the initial process of getting a little bit frosty. Okay? Frosty in a way where you start to say to yourself, coming off those sure shots, I thought I was gauging, you know, what was the expectations were. But come find out, I don't have a clue. Because some of this is just a little bit frosty to me. Probables. The first one on the list is Anthony Joshua. Shouldn't Anthony Joshua, in your opinion? No, let me get through this. Well, Anthony Joshua, a couple of the losses are ugly. And he ultimately fell short of most people's expectation. But if you want to make the case that AJ is a sure shot because of his star power and because he's a heavyweight, I'll listen. So he's willing to listen because a lot of people, especially when we was coming up, when Deontay was reigning defending WBC king and Joshua had the unified heavyweights titles, the other three titles, it wasn't a conversation to be had that Anthony Joshua name wouldn't appear. And there were many who would protest, and there were many who would protest that Joshua was better than Deontay, Joshua did this, Joshua beat that. And then what Britt you talk about? Do you know Joshua sold out Wembley? Did you hear Eddie Hearns? He sold up 90,000 at Wembley. Deontay never did it. That's where it gets a little crazy because you can't tell them that they're not telling the truth. You have to include Klitschko at the time. Anyway, back to the topic. Okay. Anthony Joshua, an Olympic gold standard champion, he did unify the division. Jarrell Miller has stepped in. He was about to get his payday. He was about to challenge the man who decided to visit the U.S. footprint of boxing to defend those titles. And you know what? Disaster. Anything that was imminent in the most ominous way happened. Jarrell Miller popped dirty, which could have changed his entire career beating Anthony Joshua. It could have put him into a multi-million-dollar whirlwind of monetary gain if he would have beat Joshua and then went and beat him again in a rematch. But he popped dirty, right? And we end up seeing Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz. Yes, Andy Ruiz, short, stubby, very crafty, slick Mexican heavyweight fighter. Not the tallest, not the biggest, but he got them hands. A lot of people were saying, a lot of people were saying, including myself, that when he fought Joseph Parker for the vacant, he actually won that fight. When he came in here, a lot of people was scratching their brow. I don't know what to think about this. Can he handle somebody like Anthony Joshua? He's been proven, to have some punching power. Early on in Joshua's career, he used to throw that uppercut all too often, just like they criticized Ryan Garcia's left hook. But anyway, Anthony Joshua, Andy Ruiz, people was really up here guessing and like, I don't know how to gauge this. Man, did it turn out to be a dandy? Joshua did earn and draw first blood to the canvas. Andy Ruiz went. He stood up, beat the count. I would have thought if you would have asked me, would it be a robbery? Would they save him? I would have thought at that point of Andy Ruiz getting knocked down, they would have saved him. Anyway, Andy Ruiz would go on to make Joshua quit. Make him spit out his gum shield, just make him reassess why he was even in the US of A anyway. So he would quit. He would get counted out. Andy Ruiz etched his name in the history as the first Mexican heavyweight, right? It changed his career, but you don't see him on the list. The rematch happened in Saudi where Joshua was a little bit more comfortable with his game plan just to stay on the outside, clear of trouble. And that's what he did, people. He stayed out, stayed clear of any potential risk, and he gained his titles back. So he did what he's supposed to do. He became two-time unified heavyweight champion. Now, after that, we know he was stepping there with Alexander Usyk after he faced Chase Witherspoon and I believe Derek Chisora. I believe, if I'm correct. But he will lose both times. His career never really, regained that elevation he did when he was fighting the Klitschko, the Charles Martin, and the Joseph Parkers. He never really was able to regain that elevation. So I really think that the probables, he's right. But also I believe he's a Hall of Famer anyway. Anthony Joshua is a sure shot to get it in first ballot, in my opinion. So I wouldn't argue the point too extensively. Probables. Because I'm pretty cool with that. But definitely sure shot, yeah. Errol Spence Jr. Now this is where I'm a non-smoker. right? But I was truly thinking about running through the wilderness, seeing can I catch somebody slipping, growing some bud out there. Um, Errol Spence is on the probables. It said it remains to be seen how, or if at all, Spence will respond to his first defeat, but win over Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, Udenis Ugas, and Kell Brook prior to that, likely getting him over the Hall of Fame hump, even if he never fights again. And this was really an extensive kickstand, moment where, the conversation was just somewhat posted for a second. You know how you out there having a decent conversation. Errol Spence in the probables, it really piqued a lot of interest of boxing voices because certain people highlight him, in a degree of Kell Brook was all of that. Sean Porter was all of that, you know? And then there's other people like myself who I would say, yes, I enjoyed his fight with Kell Brook. Kell Brook was just returning back down to floor number 1 off a Triple G loss, which he was stopped in under 8 months. But yet, not to take anything away from Spence, he got the job done. Then he went in there and fought Sean Porter, who was just pretty much off a vacant title win to regain a WBC title again. And he defeated Sean Porter in that vacant title match, and he will go on to defend against Errol Spence. Now, that was an exciting fight. Errol Spence in the eye of the storm, hey, he landed that left hook and dropped Sean Porter. And that right there, in a matter of inches, the snapshot was all that was needed for Errol Spence to pull out the split decision. Now, I'm not saying Sean Porter would have won if he wouldn't have got, his glove wouldn't have touched the canvas. It might have been a draw, but that was a very close fight. All right. If you take the Kell Brook and the Sean Porter fight, based off the quality, the qualifications of his opposition, I mean, people give him credit. When you add on Udenis Ugas, people look at the damage that was inflicted. I mean, hey, Udenis Ugas looked better against Sean Porter than he did against Errol Spence. You know what I'm saying? He looked very bad. And Errol Spence will later go on to take Udenis Ugas' WBA title. If that is enough to include the Mikey Garcias, who came up 2 weight divisions, if that's enough to include the Lamont Peterson that he's fought, or the Chris Algieri. Not too long ago, Chris Algieri was coming off a 2 straight loss, and then a win, and then he fought. Good guy. This has nothing to do with them not being a good guy, but Chris Algieri and everybody else that they want to try to throw up there. You can't throw Carlos Ocampo in there, man. Come on, bro. You can't. Don't do that to yourself. It's gonna be tough. I don't think Errol Spence gets in the first ballot. Will he get in? I believe as a unified champion, he'll get in sooner or later, but I'm not sure as to when. I'm gonna move on. Arthur Beterbiev. I spoke about him, being able to become the light heavyweight undisputed champion, fighting a very tough adversary who he would end up going into a rematch with, unsuccessfully defending his titles. It says he seemed on the path to sure shot status until he fell short in the rematch with Bivol. And there's a chance he won't accomplish anything else now that he's in the 40s. But Beterbiev wasn't a lengthy or particular active pro career. So some voters may pause, even though he was an absolute beast throughout his 5-year lineal light heavyweight title reign. And this is a little bit shaky. You know what I'm saying? It's like listening to Rice Krispies when you pour milk in them, they start to pop a little bit, right? I say to myself, is the guy showing a little bias who was deriving this list? Because at one point in time, Beterbiev had 100% KO percentage. 100%. But now you want to throw in 40s? What does 40s have to do with it? 40s is not going to stop Manny Pacquiao from becoming the first ballot Hall of Famer. So what does the 40s have to do with it? Nothing. Nothing. For him to fall short, isn't that what a lot of fighters on this list have? Losses? So for him to have a single loss and that be held against him for not being the sure shots is crazy. It's crazy. All because Bivol fought Canelo Alvarez and beat him as a pound-for-pound fighter. Canelo was a pound-for-pound fighter. Has Artur Beterbiev defeated a pound-for-pound fighter? There's a lot of little small fractures of criticism that I'm seeing here with potentially with Beterbiev. But you get what I'm saying. Kenshiro Terashi. The Amazing Boys resume should land him narrowly on the plus side of the IBHOF International Boxing Hall of Fame line, but you never know if a mostly North American voter base will come through for a pint-sized foreign fighter with limited international exposure. But given that he's 33 years of age, still going strong, and did some of his most memorable work in his past few fights, the odds are in his favor. See, this is what I try to speak on, right? International exposure. Isn't that important? I mean, that's important. So when we speak on some of these foreign fighters, and being the fact that they're very limited in coming over here, you cannot turn it around and for food for thought and say, well, we haven't went over there. No, we're the Mecca. You know, we're huge over here in the US when it comes to boxing. There's a surplus of promoters that present fight cards over here. There's a huge broadcast all throughout the USA. So international exposure is absolutely the correct term that should pop up in the conversation every day now and then when we're talking about some of these foreign fighters. Who have they fought over here? Is there anybody for them to fight over here? If not, cool. But if they have fighters on the ranking system, it'd be good to see them over here so they can get that exposure. And also we can know who they were. Because I did not know who this guy was when he was on the list. All right. Let's move it on. The one and only Deontay Bronze Bomber Wilder. Bronze medalist. You already know what it is. The WBC King. It says the resume says long shot. And so does the technique that seems to answer the question. What if you tried to teach an inflatable tube, man, outside a car dealership to box? But borderline heavyweights, especially those who rank among the most destructive punches ever, are never as borderline as they would be if they were lighter. He's extremely overly critical, in my opinion, because now we're talking about Hall of Famer, but yet you want to include technique. Which one is it? You're saying he should be a long shot because of his technique, but yet when we provide an equation of 10 successful title defenses to addition that, right, with over 5 years reigning heavyweight champion, we should show him the same glory that you showed Tyson Fury for saying he was the second longest lineal champion ever. You feel me? Because he wasn't active during that entire tenure that you added. Deontay was active doing his 10 successful title defenses. And he was one of the most highlight reel fighters that was out there. Now, he did receive a lot of criticism for whatever technique that they considered to be unorthodox. But on the front end of that technique, and we totally understand there's different types of ammunition, but the explosives that he had in the right hand was God-gifted. It was God gifted because he was cracking heads. And you know what? When you speak of his fragmented technique, you should ask yourself when you was putting this information, when you was jotting down, when you was using the home keys, so effortless, right? You should have said to yourself, if Deontay Wilder technique was such a problem, why did it take him so long to go through a tough exposure versus another top tier opponent in Fury? Why did it take him so long? If it was easy, then everybody would have did it already. They would have basically taken advantage of Deontay Wilder's lack of skill set, but they wasn't happening. You had fighters that he was going in there with that had better technical skill display, but he couldn't get it done. They couldn't get it done because Deontay Wilder put him to sleep. The man sits at 43 knockouts right now. Shout out to the Bronze Bomber. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get your love. You know what I'm saying? Even if it's when you putting that jacket on and you giving your freaking speech. And you can remind them what your grandma said. She said she was anointed, and that anointed warrior, that soldier walked through boxing, and he did what he had to do to prove to the people that he was special. Yes, sir. Salute to him. Long shots. Long shots is where it gets a little, soft. The kind of soft way, you stick your hand in it and you get poked and you find out there's some porcupine quills in there. But you didn't see that because they was nice and deep in the pudding and somebody just left that spoon in there so you can take. No. This way it gets a little bit, pricky. Danny Garcia. Yeah, the very popular Danny Garcia too. One suspects his career is over, but he hasn't announced that yet. The 140-pound resume is exceptional. Still, he probably needed one big win at welter and instead fell short against Spence, Porter, and Keith Thurman. That is absolutely correct. Line that up perfectly. Lined it up perfectly. He fought Spence for the vacant WBC, which was previously Keith Thurman's belt. He lost. He went in there against Errol Spence. On Errol Spence's return, and he was beat up, something serious. Keith Thurman, hey, it was a pretty good fight to me. But Keith Thurman clearly won that fight and took Danny Garcia's WBC belt. Danny Garcia is a long shot. His 140-pound documentation, his body of work, his portfolio, yes, exceptional, right? But just to fight for a vacant title upon your entry with a couple of catch weights, I believe, to become a champion that way and then lose it and was never able to shelf another top-tier name to the heads on your boxing mantle. That is something that's going to be in question when your name pops up eligibility-wise for the Hall of Fame when it's the first ballot. But shout out to DSG. I like the guy, man. Cool people. Keith Thurman. He back then he was called one time. I got a couple of those meaningful close wins at 147 over Garcia and Porter. But he was never quite the same after elbow and hand injuries in 2017, 2018. And losing to a 40-year-old Pacquiao killed his momentum. Now, he said losing to a 40-year-old Pacquiao killed his momentum. That's only a portion of what may have stalled him out. I think the injuries. Keith Thurman was a very likable, interesting champion at welterweight. He provided life to the welterweight division. You feel me? His hiatus when he went on vacation for the injuries, he just fell off. I mean, when you want to talk about Operation Silence, like it was a while where Keith Thurman, nobody was talking about him. Like at one point in time, they called him one time because he was dropping them hammers on fighters. He wasn't a one-quitter hitter, but Keith Thurman was what you consider a very solid, respectable fighter when it came to his technical skills. But he just fell off with inactivity, y'all. And then, yes, it looked bad for him to go in there and lose to Pacquiao. But then, depending on who you're conversing with, they would tell you, Pacquiao still looks good on his record, even if it's a loss. He's an 8. They start running down Pacquiao's 8 division championship and all that, right? Did it stall his momentum? I don't think so. I don't think so, because guess what? That's his first loss. That was his first loss ever. So how can it just strip his momentum? No, it was his inactivity. Next, let's talk about the Charlo twins. Look how short of a summary that he gave the Charlo twins. And is it warranted? Let's read it and see. Jamal and Jamel have had distinct careers, and neither's necessarily finished. But they both cooled off in their 30s and aren't even guaranteed to get on to the IBHOF ballot. They're not even going to get on the ballot for the first. And, you know, a part of me says, okay, Jamal Charlo, 2 division champion. Okay. Jamel Charlo, undisputed 154. If anybody would have heard when I was providing a prognosticated scenario, my prediction was if PBC, who is known to highly support in-house fights, all they could have did is business. I said this time and time again prior to Errol Spence facing Crawford. I said if they will only allow Errol Spence to go up to 154 and face Jamel Charlo. Jamel Charlo already had a loss. Allow Errol Spence to give him his second loss. But with that said, these fighters have the opportunity to make money. All they have to do is exactly what WCS suggested. Allow Errol Spence to win the undisputed titles. And of course, in the contract, there's a rematch. You get 2 paydays. And also, in this conversation, for the sure shots, the probables, we're talking about a whole different result. We're talking about Errol Spence being a 2 division unified champion. Okay. Undisputed 154. Don't matter if he collected all the belts in one shot. Then you have Jamel Charlo, who would have been 2-time undisputed super welterweight world champion. He would have separated himself from his brother. It doesn't matter if it was from Errol Spence. That would have been 2 fights, good money, and also it would have pretty much added some more criteria to beef up their boxing scene position on whether they should be long shots, probable, or sure shots. But that's not the case. Okay. Moving on to Erislandy Lara, often underappreciated, never defeated decisively, and still a championship level fighter at age 42. Lara deserves consideration, but as long as fellow Cuban defector Joel Casamayor continues to languish on the ballot, it's hard to feel optimistic about Lara. This is what I have to say. You know, Lara's a good guy. He can box too, man. He's changed up his style too. There were certain times in his career that people considered him to be extremely banal. But he has since, you know, put that the pasture. And I believe he's pretty exciting to watch. Not just him making Danny Garcia quit, but it just comes to a point where the popularity isn't there. The respect outweighs the popularity. People respect Erislandy Lara, but he did lose to some big names. Though controversial with Paul Williams, he was in there with some big names. But he didn't get the dub or the win on those big names. So when he does appear, people will give him his credit. They would say, hey, he was a great fighter. You know, he was in there with some big names. He's solid. He's still going as we speak. But that's about it. That's where it ends. But where he gets into the Hall of Fame, I have no idea. If you ask me, to get the newest updated GPS coordinates. I couldn't tell you where to put it. When it's gonna touch down. I couldn't tell you. Let's go on to Emmanuel Navarrete, Mr. Vacant Title Connoisseur. The fan-friendly Mexican scene on the right trajectory through the first Oscar Valdez fight 2 years ago. But questionable training habits appear to have caught up with him, and he's perhaps lucky to have gone 1-1-1 with one no contest since. When he fought my guy Isaac Dogbay, I was saying Emmanuel Navarrete is pretty good fighter, man. But, he has this wild gunslinger type style that he does things like slingshotting himself off the ropes, not really using the traditional, work your jab and then come in with your power shots or try to work different things. He's just a very slinky type of fighter. He's wild. He's erratic at certain points. He's just haven't been able to evolve that type of style. Let's say Emmanuel Augustus, he had his unique style. Emmanuel Navarrete hasn't been able to work his craft to continue to, kind of separate and give his opponents fits with that type of wild, eccentric style that he had. You know what I'm saying? And he was right. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with Emmanuel Navarrete, but he's a multi-division champion. And I'm going to tell you, he's going to get into the Hall of Fame, whether people like his style or not. He's going to get in the Hall of Fame, man. A Mexican fighter too. I mean, he's going to get in the Hall of Fame, period. Carlos Cudras, a damn good fighter who couldn't win the big one. Cudras went 1-4 against Chocolatito, Estrada, Jesban Rodriguez, and Sir Rungfasai, and 43-1-1 against everyone else. He's not just a long shot, he's an extreme long shot. But with the way HOF standards keep slowly slipping, I believe Carlos Cudras will be in the Hall of Fame sooner or later. When that clock is going to tick and they're going to call his name, I have no idea. But he has been in there with some solid names that you can say common opponents. He may not have gotten the win, but there's some fighters on here that are in the same position that couldn't have went, that did not show up for the big fight. So it is going to be tough. It is going to be tough for him to get first ballot. But we just have to pay attention for whenever that time comes. Adrian Bronner, the Can Man, 4-weight world champion. It says, I know he's nowhere close to being a Hall of Famer. He's nowhere close to being a Hall of Famer. It would be nice to trust voters not to be fooled by the words 4-division champion. But my days of trusting voters not to be fooled are long behind me. So if you understand that, like a lot of fighters on here with credentials, Adrian Bronner has people just, it's almost like their panoptic view of Adrian Bronner. It's more of the lens, it's more of the shot that they want instead of just being eye level with him. Because Adrian Bronner completed a lot early in his career, thank God. And he's a 4-weight world champion. There's no denying that. But AB, they tend to give a panoptic view of AB as a fighter and a person, to look at all of what he was doing that didn't quite give him the best look as a fighter. Like, he never came into the sport, in my opinion, to be a role model. But a lot of people gravitated to AB because his personality. I like Adrian Bronner, man. Like this, when I say I like a fighter, it's just my interaction with him. I've seen Adrian Bronner, kind of move the room when he wasn't even on the fight card, and he was just there supporting another fighter. But AB has also been outside doing what he's doing, having his recreational fun. And people don't like that. They felt like when he lost to Marcus Madonna, which I consider one of his better fights, people still want to hold grudges, man. He lost. Or he picked up his first loss. What more do you want the man to do? But at the end of the day, is the Hall of Fame looking at some other sort of criteria to basically qualify Adrian Broner and others? Are we looking at morals? Are we looking at principles? Are we looking at core values? I mean, you got to ask yourself, if that part of the criteria, then they should really check the front door of boxing, because you have criminals from all walks of life coming to be boxers. So you can't allow the boxers to come in from all walks of life with a criminal record, but yet you place somewhat of a lens of judgment on them for how they act during their career being a professional boxer. Doesn't make no sense. Let's get to the Ryan Garcia. Yeah, you thought it was all over, huh? You thought that you had cleared up all the controversy by the names that I've read up to this point. Hold on for a second. Okay, we back. And shout out to everybody who pulled up. So Ryan Garcia. Yeah. Who would have thought out of all the names we just mentioned that has some type of connection to a world championship, not an interim, but have some type of interaction, or there has been something that register on their box rec that says, okay, I can understand why they put him on here. If you look up here, he's a long shot. But, Ryan Garcia in general has been a long shot for a minute, even in his boxing career. Right now, he's coming off a loss to Rolando Romero, and he's on a hiatus. After a year off, he had to have hand surgery. It says, you think a 26-year-old like Garcia will land in the too soon to tell section. But we have a pretty clear idea already. My bad, y'all. It said you think a 26-year-old Garcia will land in the too soon to tell section. But we have a pretty clear idea already of what King Rai is. And what he is leans heavily into what the F is in IBHO fame stands for. And history says not to be 100% sure that fame alone won't give a boxer the votes he needs. So they're trying to say Ryan Garcia's fame, though short-lived at the moment, it's been enough exposure for him to potentially get into the Hall of Fame. Wow. That's a bit lunacy to me. Fame, y'all. Now we should include fame. Okay? Fame. That may be a very fine detail we was leaving out. Fame. How much fame do these boxers have? Because in one perspective, we're talking about a fighter should need some type of hardware, right? To build up his credentials. You know what I'm saying? Thicken the portfolio a little bit. Build up those points, man. But now we should think about the fame aspect, which some people say popularity, but no, we need to now change that. Fame. We need to consider fame. This guy is saying Ryan Garcia, fame may potentially give him the votes. That is wow. The fame of a fighter without the resume of others who are professional fighters may potentially get his nod into the Boxing Hall of Fame. That's remember that F, y'all. Fame. Very, very. Come on, y'all. This is a change of the time. Fame, y'all. He's saying fame. If you got the fame as a boxer, not the chips, not divisional titles, not a lineal, not boxer of the year, but you got that fame. Fame. We're gonna live forever. We're gonna learn how to fly. Y'all don't know nothing about that. That was way back in the day. But we should take that serious, yo. Fame. Ryan Garcia has fame that may get him through those doors. Too soon to tell. I'm never gonna forget that. He is injecting one of the most unique letters at the highest power when it comes to boxers being rewarded for their accomplishments as a profession. This guy says fame. Attach that now. Insert it, that one letter, into a boxer's credential when you're considering them to be something higher than what their portfolio says they are. You should include fame. How much fame did he have or her? Okay, moving on. Too soon to tell. Teofimo Lopez. Some may say a two-division lineal champion who holds a legit win. Perhaps the only legit win over Lomachenko is already a lock for the Hall of Fame. But there's too much inconsistency and unpredictability to Lopez's performances and his behavior. He needs to stave off implosion a little longer before he's a cinch. So what they're saying is they're including Teofimo's behavior. How can you do that? Like I just said, boxers come from all walks of life, right, to enter the sport, and you have zero prerequisites. It's not like they have to come in here like driver's education. And did you take that course? Oh, you did? Okay. What about the Christian, the boys and girls Christian council, summer camp? Did you complete the 8-week course? Oh, you did all that. Okay. Did you memorize your scriptures and your verses? Can you quote them to me right now? And you stutter one time, that's going to be points deducted. I mean, are they pretty much sending them through a Bible camp correspondence course? Now we're talking about inconsistency and unpredictability to Lopez performances. The man became unified champion in 16 professional fights, world champion in 15 professional fights. He did what he was supposed to do when he was supposed to do it. Point blank. And put that dot in the middle of your forehead. He did what he's supposed to do. Now, if a fighter has an accomplishment that stands out other than most, but yet you're talking about, and please, let this soak in. The guy that wrote this article. Let me go back up to the top. Who are you again? Eric. Let this soak in, Eric. How can you speak on a fighter's behavior when they're boxers? Boxers, like I tell people, will always have domestic issues because they're getting punched in the head. In no way, shape, or form, these boxers should be held accountable just because their erratic behavior, even though racist, being racially insensitive. There's internal punishment and reprimands and consequences for that. So if that's what you're trying to imply, okay, then kind of paint it a different way. Put some, put color into it a little bit. Let your contextual freaking delivery be just a little bit more straight to the point. Don't talk about inconsistent unpredictability to his performances and behavior, because boxers always going to have some behavior issues because they get hit in the head. Come on, bro. You can't sit up here and talk about behavior. And then we have to go way deep to several dozen fighters who have had domestic issues, behavior issues, pop positive for Pez. Isn't popping dirty? Doesn't that have to do with your ethics? Okay. Moving on. Gervonta Tank Davis. Tank's outlook is similar to T.O.'s. He's a bigger star than Lopez, but a bit less accomplished in the ring, and has also drifted in and out of lower rungs of pound-for-pound lists. And he's on a Hall of Fame path if he doesn't fall apart. His upcoming rematch with Lamont Roach could push him in one direction or the other. Now, this is another one. You're bringing up behavior now. You inserted fame. Behavior and fame can pretty much be synonymous depending on how you look at it. Yeah, it can be synonymous because notoriety comes in a good and bad way, especially when it comes to these two examples. You know, both of them in a negative light has had their time in the media. Absolutely. But should it be something that you take when you're voting in these guys' first ballot Hall of Fame and it didn't affect them boxing? Let's just say it was something that didn't affect the sport. They wasn't caught putting plaster of Paris in their raps. They didn't pop dirty. They didn't find brass knuckles in there. They didn't find out that they somehow removed the padding from their gloves and was caught cheating. I mean, those are where you should actually question them being voted in the Hall of Fame. Because you have to ask, how many fights have they been doing this? But for these two, yes, they have had public moments which deserves reprimands. And it's no different than some of the greats who are glorified as legends, but yet they had jail time. You know, they did some questionable things in the ring, like biting ears, fighting dirty, whatever the case may be. You know what I'm talking about. But I do believe Gervonta Tank Davis will be in the Hall of Fame. And I believe the same with Teofimo Lopez. David Benavidez. If not his fault, Canelo wants nothing to do with him and won't give him an opportunity to cement his Hall of Fame case. Wins over David Morrell, Caleb Plant, and Demetrius Andrade are all significant, but it feels like the Mexican monster is still one major victory away. Now, I agree with his correlation of achievements currently, but David Benavidez is still young. He's still young. And he still has enough landscape to win some championships, to fight some big names. Cruiserweight is going to be there sooner or later for David Benavidez. He's young. I know people believe he's older, but he's a younger brother of Jose Benavidez. I do believe if he adds he addition just a little bit more to his portfolio, it will provide him with ample amount of credentials for consideration once he's become eligible for that first ballot. I truly believe that. But I agree with Eric on this. Yeah, he does seem like he's one major victory away, a big victory. Would it be with Canelo? I don't know. Just Bam Rodriguez. The phrase Hall of Fame trajectory was created for fighters like Bam. He's just 25. He's already beaten Estrada, Kudras, and Sor Rungvisai, and he keeps getting better. It's just a little early to fully anoint him. I believe right this point right now, Bam Rodriguez gets into the hall. They wanted the man to move up a couple of divisions and fight. He won. He stopped. He stopped his opposition. Dropped back down, unified. Very entertaining. Talk about fame now. Let's put the F in it. It ain't complete unless you put that in it. That F, that fame. Bam got that fame because he moved back up there and fought one of the kings who's been in there with Chocolate Tito. You know what I'm saying? People trying to say he'll pass his heyday, but he went in there and stopped the man. He wasn't just beating these guys. He was going in there putting on fame worthy. Okay, fame worthy. Yes, fame worthy performances. That's what Bam Rodriguez does. Yeah, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. I hope he stays healthy. I hope he doesn't, have to stay on a long hiatus because I like seeing him fight. Now, those of you that keep on putting Junto Nakatani into Bam's freaking pathway, man, give this man his space to do what he's supposed to do. He's fighting Kafu up next. All that, man. Just let the man continue to build. He has a heck of a freaking resume right now. Based off his achievements, not just going into the ring, splitting the ropes and giving you 10 to 12 rounds. He's going in there and he's showing you angles. He's showing you performance conclusions that are worthy of he's doing what he's supposed to do. Salute to him. Next, Junto Nakatani. A lot of people are high on Junto Nakatani, man. Some people say he's worthy. Some people say he's not. It says all the above text about Rodriguez fairly directly applies to the 27-year-old Nakatani. Who knows? The two of them may eventually have a Hall of Fame famous showdown someday, as they're currently just 3 pounds apart. 1 or 2 more good years, or one win over an A-list opponent like Rodriguez, or if he could pull it off in a way, and Big Bang can book his ticket to the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Hey, we have to see. I think, just like many, Nakatani is a multi-division champion, lighter weight classes, just like Bam Rodriguez in a way, I think for sure he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Seriously. He's still in his 20s. There's no telling when he moves up. Will he be able to fight in a way before he, retires? Because there's been word out there that he may retire, somewhere close up the line. But yeah, Nakatani, if it's Bam Rodriguez or if it's Anui, the potentials are out there for him. Moving on, Shakur Stevenson. Just like Nakatani, Stevenson is an undefeated 27-year-old southpaw on most pound-for-pound lists. The styles are quite different. Shakur Stevenson, in my opinion, yes, he still need some marquee names, yo. But Shakur is a 3-weight world champion. If these fighters in divisions, then they should be rewarded. Each division, of course, depending on who they fought to earn a championship at that division, it all depends on what's the appraising value. I always use appraisal because how an onlooker, whether it be a casual or a hardcore fan, values that fighter, it depends on, how they express themselves on the value that they give that fighter at that division. Some are educated freaking opinions and some aren't. So the appraising value, it only matters to those who are respected to pretty much know with a certain level of unbiasedness on what they rate these fighters at certain divisions. Of course, we're talking about the F, the Foxtrot. Shakur Stevenson, people know who he is. Does he have the fame like some other fighters? I would say no, but people know who he is. They know who Shakur Stevenson is, especially over here. He just has to continue to go over here and do what he do, like fighting William Cepeda, and he'll no doubt get on the first ballot Hall of Fame. He's a 3-weight world champion, and he's a silver champion Olympian. It goes on to say, though it can be a little tougher to get the HOF votes if you're perceived as a stinker. But Stevenson will nevertheless be impossible to deny if he remains at this level for a couple of more years. Now he's including the S word, stinker. This guy is providing us with so many other points of references that we didn't know existed when they talk about the Hall of Fame. Now this, if he wants to talk about them letting certain people in, well, if you want to talk about how people are with their behavior, and then you want to use the phrase stinker as to say, well, he's going into the ring and he's not that entertaining. It's a lot of fighters on here. Some of their fights is not entertaining. But is that part of the criteria for them to get the vote? I mean, when you all are having a community conversation in behind closed doors, are y'all speaking about the way somebody performance was when they fought at this fight venue? Or are you talking about how they act, what they said for you to basically pinpoint that particular action? Is that what's going on here? Because that seems like it's more gossiping than anything. We're talking about the International Boxing Hall of Fame, yo. And y'all up here talking about how fighters and what they did in their personal lives. And though not all of it is criminal, you want to talk about behavior now. But yet you want to include fame. Devin Haney. This is where we shift from the in the hall, as long as he doesn't go wildly astray, crowd to someone whose continued success is less assured. Haney is only 26 and resume includes the lineal lightweight title and win, however disputed, over Lomachenko, but it remains unknown how much his punishing fight with the over the weight artificially enhanced Ryan Garcia took out of him. Now, this is where you scratch your head. Yes. You scratch your head because you just when you think you have it all figured out, you don't. As you probably seen, Ryan Garcia was higher up. Y'all saw what Ryan Garcia was, right? Ryan Garcia was up here with long shots. But Devin Haney name pops up for this, evaluation. And Ryan Garcia gets praised. Not only that, he injects the F name for Ryan Garcia. But yet when it comes to Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia get praised for being overweight and artificially enhanced. How is he getting praised? He's pretty much saying that Devin Haney, we don't know for sure how he's gonna perform and what that took out of. That's crazy, yo. That is extremely biased. That is absolutely the bias paragraph I heard so far in an assessment of a fighter. Why is biased? Because as a champion, Devin Haney did everything he was supposed to do. But when you dive a little bit into how the humanistic perception is when it comes to boxing fans, it's over the top. And he's a perfect example of that. Ryan Garcia is up there with those guys for fame. But also, you want to talk about behavior of Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davis. But yet you're not talking about the behavior of Ryan Garcia to a point that you even put him on a list with no championship belts? Are you insane? You're criticizing Devin Haney for taking punishment when he made weight as a champion. This is where you find the smut. The list is good, like I said, for conversation. But to have Ryan Garcia out here and to know he said what he said, he lied when he lied to the build up to the fight, came in unprofessionally overweight and popped dirty for pads. This guy right here, Eric, is pretty much what you're telling me is you're condoning this, because no way, shape, or form you would give Ryan Garcia a positive exposure when you're talking about Devin Haney for the damage that he inflicted on the fighter that came in on weight and did what a professional was supposed to do. He made weight while you came in overweight and you was dirty. This is the most biased one of the night. Virgil Ortiz. But is Devin going to get in the Hall of Fame? Of course. Of course. Does he need some more to his resume being a 2-division champion? Of course. No doubt about it. But he's going to get in the Hall of Fame. Point blank. Virgil Ortiz. His health problems appear to be behind him, and tough wins over Sergey Boychuk and Israel Madrimov prove plenty. But there's a long way to go before his accomplishments place him in the Hall of Fame. I agree with that. Sort of, kind of. When it comes down to Virgil Ortiz, he got that heart. He been wanting to get at, some of these guys, and they said, no, we got to slow him down. Then, he had to take time off from the sport to deal with his illness. Still came back, faced adversity, came out victorious, though controversial. He faced adversity and came out on top, right? What's next for him? Coming off a Boychuk win and a Madrimov win, I would say his Madrimov win was his best performance at 154. I mean, that's clear and present common sense right there. But does he have enough right now to get in the Hall of Fame? No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. You know what I'm saying? Not at all. But will he get there? I believe. Yeah, he might. It's just all about who he fights coming up. Jerome Bucenis. Much like his theoretical rival Ortiz, the talent is obvious, but the quality of opposition has been spotty. Dominating and stopping Stantionis was a huge statement. Several bigger statements are required before he gets to think about joining the Immortals. I don't know about this immortal stamp that you putting, not with the criteria that you putting out here. You're talking about fame and behavior. That's just crazy. But you reward other fighters for their unsatisfactory behavior. But you want to award them for having fame. But you want to highlight other fighters for being inconsistent. You're a bit inconsistent, as you draw down on this list. Jaron Ennis. Of course, he has some more work to do. Of course, I see him in a boat where he's still paddling upstream. He did beat Stantionis, but it's still not enough for him to be considered Hall of Fame right now. Point blank. Does he have the potential, as young as he is, 27-year-old, to get it, to basically consummate any doubt? Yeah, absolutely. Right now, no. Is 154 a stomping ground that he can potentially build his boxing FICO? Yes, absolutely. I agree. I absolutely agree. He can absolutely do it. It's going to take some time, but he can get it done. You know what I'm saying? He's very, very talented. And depending on who they match him up with up there, how long it takes. I always say this. Some of these fighters stay at divisions too dang long. And then when they move up to the next division, they just can't do anything there either because they stayed at the lower division too long. Now it's hard for them to make the division they just moved into. But he shall get there, I believe. If he stays on the right path, earn another championship at 54, 60. I see Ennis. I see him potentially, going as high as 168. I do. That's if he stays in the sport long enough. I see him going as high as 168. Ja Opathia. It's unheard to get into the Hall of Fame on the basis of a cruiserweight title reign alone. The undefeated Aussie has ruled the division for nearly 3 years, but chances are uh, him as a candidate will come down to whether he can eventually make some noise at heavyweight. Then again, staying put and breaking all the records for a length of cruiserweight reign and number of defenses could do the trick. I don't know. I mean, Usyk, he was undisputed there. Is he going undisputed? It's a little tricky for Ja right now. He still has work to do. He has work to do, point blank. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's not much to say about this guy. He has work to do. He's definitely not there right now. But there are names there that if he attempt to unify, then we're talking a different language. But not right now. The one and only Daniel Dubois, who's set to face Alexander Usyk real soon and try his hand at becoming heavyweight undisputed world champion. It says if he wins his rematch with Usyk next month to become the one true heavyweight champion of the world, he's in. If he loses, well, Dubois is only 27. So that's time to rebuild. And as stated several times already in this article, if you're going to be borderline Hall of Fame candidate, you're going to want to be a heavyweight. And that's, like I said, with Ennis' age. Both, Daniel Dubois and Jaron Ennis is both 27 years of age. They have some youth on their side, especially Dubois. He's a current reigning IBF heavyweight world champion. He gets a second shot at fighting Alexander Usyk. The first one was a totally different Dubois. But I'm going to be honest with you. He's improved since then. He's improved with Jarrell Miller, Philippe Herkovic, and Anthony Joshua. Man, he's on a tear right now. So he has to go in there and be smart. But Usyk, man, he's a different beast. I'm not going to lie. Usyk is a different beast. And Daniel Dubois, in order to tame that beast, he's going to have to use all of his boxing IQ. I mean, he's going to have to be dirty in there when it's time to get dirty. He's going to have to be smart when it's time to be smart. There's a lot that's going to have to factor in to Daniel Dubois getting it done against Usyk, who defeated Tyson Fury, who was much bigger. So when it comes down to size, strength, I don't think Usyk have a problem. But if Dubois, who a lot of people consider to be a fighter, a lot of people agreed that Dubois landed a nice shot on the belt line of Usyk and dropped him. If he can get a well-placed shot again, now that his psychological blade is sharper, then we might see Daniel Dubois becoming heavyweight champion, bro. You know what I'm saying? I'm rooting for Dubois' return. To etch his name in the history books, man. I'm just contemplating on whether he can get it done, whether he's there yet, talent-wise, IQ-wise, to go in there with a boxer with the namesake of a Alexander Usyk, one of the best of this era, yo. I don't know. I'm still thinking, man. I got some days left, man. I don't know. You tell me what y'all think, yo. But shout out to Eric Raskin, man. A very grainy, but yet informative article, breaking this down. It was very productive to boxing conversation. With any article, you're going to have controversy. And that's exactly what you've seen in here from Eric Raskin. But overall, I enjoyed the breakdown. I did. I enjoyed the breakdown. It wasn't supposed to be pretty, but also on the other side, it wasn't going to be laid out beautifully for people just to read and say, oh, okay, all right, I agree. No, you're going to have some twists and turns, some ups and downs. You're going to have some straights and some corners. That's what it's going to be, and that's what it was. So salute to Eric for doing your thing. But you did allow us to know that you're injecting fame into it now. Okay? That's what you are ejecting fame for a fighter to get into the Boxing Hall of Fame. Fame. They got to have fame, yo. Also, you want to include behavior. Now fighters need to make sure their report cards, they understand they're getting these remote report cards that they didn't know existed. When their name pops up for eligibility on the Hall of Fame, bring up his report card from 2030, please. Yeah, we just want to look over some things. What was his conduct like? Unsatisfactory at the time, huh? Okay. And, you know, you got to go back to then grade school, man. They're going to start giving you report cards. Real talk. But, man, hey, you already know, man. Hopefully y'all learned something from that breakdown. Shout out to boxingscene.com. Like I said before, I enjoyed it. I'm gonna drop the link for a minute in case anybody wanna, give their input. I would drop the link for a minute. If y'all have anything to say, I'm not gonna be on here an extensive amount of time, but if you have something in regards to what I just went from top to bottom about the list that the Hall of Fame chances among active fighters per boxingscene.com. Okay, it had a surplus of active fighters that we all know. And the sure shots was Canelo Alvarez, Alexander Usyk, Terrence Bud Crawford, Naoya Inoue, Roman Gonzalez, Nonito Donaire, Tyson Fury, Dimitri Bivol, and Juan Estrada. Those were the only sure shots that was on this list. The rest was probable, long shots, and too soon to tell. All right. But shout out to the Hottest Chat and the MFN game, man. Y'all hold it down. Continue to support the channel. I appreciate you. I'm out.